Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something pretty crucial, but maybe not always talk about athlete labor.
Right, and specifically unionization and the power structures that exist within sports all around the world.
Exactly. And our guide for this is a really interesting study out of South Korea.
Yeah, it's called An Agenda for Research on Athlete Unions, a systematic review of international studies. It's by Chaewoon Park and Daehee Kim at Chungnam National University.
So, the mission here really is to see what this global look tells us. How can it help build, well, a better understanding, especially somewhere like Korea, where research on athlete unions is pretty scarce?
Well, that's the core problem Park and Kim point out, isn't it? You've got this growing global chat about athletes' rights, but in Korea itself, the actual academic work on unions specifically, very limited.
Hmm.
So their study aims to fill that gap by looking outwards at what's happening internationally.
Okay, so how did they do that? What was the approach to capture that, global view?
They used a systematic review, which basically means they didn't just pick a few studies they liked. They aimed for a really comprehensive, unbiased look at all the relevant international research out there.
Rigorous, then.
Very. In doing that, they distilled it down to 5 main themes that kept popping up in the global research, kind of like the key areas you need to understand.
Okay, what are they?
Well, first, the history. How did athlete unions actually form? Then, labor relations, think collective bargaining, negotiations, that sort of thing.
Right, the practical stuff.
Exactly. Third is legal rights
Yeah.
and contracts, obviously huge for athletes. Fourth is identity. Things like gender, race, how those factors play into the union experience.
That's crucial, often overlooked.
Definitely. And finally, number 5 is looking at the impact, evaluating what unions have actually achieved.
But, and this is interesting, they didn't just list what is known, did they? The study goes further.
No, absolutely not. That's the real value here. They critically analyzed what's missing, what hasn't been studied enough.
Yeah, like pointing out the heavy focus on, say, the big American leagues, right? NFL, MLB.
Precisely. While women athletes or athletes in smaller sports or those with racialized identities, they often get left out of the research picture.
And also whole countries. Places where maybe the idea of a union itself faces, like, cultural pushback.
That's a huge point they make.
Yeah.
And it connects directly back to the Korean context.
How so?
Because in Korea, they note even just saying the word union can be fraught. There's a significant fear.
Fear of what? Losing your spot.
Yeah, losing contracts, team positions, damaging your future career prospects. It creates this real silence. And it's not just culture. It's baked into the structure. It's intimidating.
Wow. That's powerful. A structural silence. It really stops collective action before it can even start, doesn't it?
It really does, which is why the study ends with this kind of call to action, a research agenda.
Okay, so what do they want researchers to focus on?
3 main things. First, really unpack why there's this silence around unionization. Dig into that fear.
Makes sense.
Second, look closely at how institutions, leagues, governing bodies actively resist framing athletes as workers in a legal sense.
Because that worker label triggers rights protection.
Exactly. It triggers labor laws, collective bargaining rights, so avoiding it is a key power move.
And the third point?
Explore the cultural side. Why, in sports specifically, is the language of labor sometimes seen as, well, inappropriate or out of place? What are those boundaries?
So, turning this to you listening, what jumps out at you from all this?
Yeah, maybe think about your own country. How are athlete unions seen? Are they just legal bodies, political forces, something else?
And what's maybe missing from the conversation where you are? Is there enough focus on the collective voice of athletes?
It's this kind of thinking, this cross-national reflection that the study argues is so important. It connects researchers. It might spark new studies.
And ultimately, it could help empower athletes, right? Especially where that collective voice is currently quieter. It's about lighting up those ignored areas.
Well said. And just to remind everyone, the paper we dove into today was An Agenda for Research on Athlete Unions, a systematic review of international studies by Chaewoon Park and Daehee Kim. Check the description for the full details.
Absolutely. Knowledge is key, so keep digging. Stay curious.
And until our next deep dive, keep asking those important questions. Keep looking into those corners that maybe don't get enough light.